You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. Steve Jobs. So welcome back to Creativity and Health. And today we're going to talk about our first secret, which is trusting your gut and why that makes you more creative and healthier. Now you might think, well, why is that a secret? I mean, that's even a saying. All the time we say, trust your gut. But the interesting thing is that we live in a culture that doesn't value intuition. It values using logic and thinking things out rationally over using intuition. In fact, I want to read this one quote from Albert Einstein that I love. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And it's so true. So what I'm going to do today is help you connect back to your intuition. Remember I said last time that we were all born creative and that it's just waiting there for us to find it again? Let's talk about why we lose our ability to be creative in the first place. What happens? So you may have heard of a guy named Carl Jung. He was a Swiss psychologist, and many, many years ago, he came up with this concept that I really love, and it's called the shadow side of the self. Have you heard of it? The idea behind the shadow is that it's the part of us that we don't want to be. It's the part of us that we suppress, put out of our consciousness. Now, that may seem a little hard to understand. So let me tell you about another person who sort of spelled it out in a way that's easier to grasp. Robert Bly wrote a book called A Little Book on the Human Shadow. And he talks about how we are born into the world as 360-degree personalities, which means that we do anything that occurs to us. We're kind of crazy if you think about it. So what happens? Our parents have to say, no, don't bite your brother's leg. I did do that. And they have to say, no, don't eat the cat food. They had to do that with me too. So after a while, you get a lot of no's. And what happens is you take these parts of yourself that you're suppressing and you put them in a bag. And you start dragging this bag behind you. And as you get older and older, the bag gets longer and longer. So that's how we start to lose part of who we really are. So where does it all start? It starts in the family. And this is not to say that families do anything wrong. It's just the way it works. When you're born into a family, families divvy out parts, like parts in a play. And so maybe one of you is the smart one, which leaves the other one to be the dumb one. One of you is the artist in the family. One of you then is not the artist, and so on. So let me tell you a story about how I first accidentally found this out and why it's so important for your creativity. It was when I was in high school. I was already a budding psychologist because there were two girls in my class named Donna and Datha, twins, beautiful, blonde hair, athletic bodies. I was so fascinated by them, but I was especially fascinated by them because they were twins. And so I was trying to figure out, well, what's that about? That means they should be exactly alike, right? But they weren't. Because Donna would carry herself like she was very sure of herself and always knew what she was doing. And Datha would act like a ditz. Like she was, sort of silly and stupid. And I couldn't figure that out because to look at them, they looked exactly the same. And then one day I found out why. They were passing tests back out to us with, graded tests. And Donna and Datha just happened to be sitting next to me. And so I took a peek over at their tests to see what they got. So let me ask you, what do you think they got? Usually people think they got the same thing. or that Donna just, got 100 and Datha got a 60 or something. Actually, Donna got a 97 and Datha got a 93. And that's when I started to figure it out. Donna was the smart one. Datha was the stupid one. That's how the roles got divvied up in that family. And you want to know what's interesting? I got a 92. They were both smarter than I was. And I was one of the smartest kids in the class. So Datha was smart. She was just a different kind of smart than Donna. So years later, I was teaching one of my creativity workshops, and I had a journalist named Bill take the workshop. And he wrote for some of the best newspapers in the world. And what he wanted to do was just write fiction. So you know the difference between journalism and fiction. Journalism, you're reporting the facts, and fiction, you're making it up as you kind of go along, right? He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. We met for 3 different workshops, about 12 weeks long each. Until the day I started talking about family roles. I talked about Donna and Datha. And he said, "Oh my God, I know what it is. My brother is the artist in the family." He had died, by the way, from AIDS. He wrote plays. He was a piano prodigy. He painted. But because Bill's brother was the artist in the family, Bill thought of himself as the non-artist. He could be a journalist, but he was never going to be an artist. So when we finally figured that out, I said to him, "Why don't you make a sign that says, 'I am a writer,' and put that on your computer every day." And after he did that, he started writing fiction. So it was all a matter of undoing a role, if this is making sense to you, a family role that had been put on him early in life that didn't really match who he was. I've seen this happen to almost every single person I have ever taught. So I'm sure there's a family role that you've taken on that doesn't match who you are. And it keeps you from seeing your gifts. Even your own physical beauty. I had someone take a workshop from me who everyone in the class thought was beautiful, but when we complimented her, she would look down and just kind of get weird about it. And she said, no, my sister is the pretty one in the family. So hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying to you. And we also lose who we are in school. We'll talk more about it next time, but the truth is, and I know because I've been a teacher, you get an A if you spit back what the teacher teaches you. If you try to do something original, who knows what's going to happen. So those are 2 places you lose a lot of your creative juice, in the family and at school. So how do you get it back? Trust your gut. There's a woman named Natalie Goldberg, and she has written a book called Writing Down the Bones, and I love this book. She talks about how we come into the world having, she calls them first thoughts, but it's really like me wanting to eat cat food or me wanting to bite my brother in the leg. I had to really try hard not to do that later in life. She calls them first thoughts, but we're not allowed to have those first thoughts. So we suppress them and we turn them into second thoughts and third thoughts and fourth thoughts. But the first thoughts are still there. And she gives an example of herself where one day she says, "I have a sore throat." But she realized that that was a fourth thought. But her first thought was, "I cut the daisy from my throat." And she thought, well, I can't say that to people because they're going to think I'm suicidal. But that's a very creative way of saying, I have a sore throat. So all of us censor ourselves. So it's not just with writing that we suppress ourselves. It's in all the different ways that we express ourselves. And as you're going to find out shortly, when I teach creativity workshops, I always ask my participants to go home and try their hand at a creative project. And I'm going to ask you to do that this week as well. But what I wanted to share right now is that once when I asked people to go home and do a project, I had a woman come back the next time that we got together. And it was really interesting because she said that she decided that she would try to watercolor, but she was going to do it with her 8-year-old daughter by her side. Why not? That would be fun, right? So they, each had a sheet of white paper in front of them and they had their watercolors, and it was time to start. And her daughter just dug right in, started going right at it. And the woman in my class said she was stuck there looking at that white sheet of paper, asking herself, what should I paint? And that is how we suppress our initial instinct.